Welcome to It's All Mental, a podcast from Everyturn Mental Health. Mental isn't a bad word. There's no health without mental health. We're here to talk about every high and low. No limits, just good conversations. Hi everyone, my name's Adam Crampsie, Chief Executive at Everyturn Mental Health. We are recording a series of videos this Pride Month to talk about all things LGBTQ+. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Richard Angell, the Chief Exec of the Terrence Higgins Trust. The Terrence Higgins Trust. You're welcome. The Terrence Higgins Trust are the largest, UK's largest sexual health and HIV charity, and what a great cause to be talking about during Pride Month. So just before we get into that though, Richard, I just want to talk through some stats around mental health and the LGBT+ population. So a study found that half of LGBTQ+ people had experienced depression and 3 in 5 had experienced anxiety. And really, quite worryingly, almost half of trans people have thought about taking their own lives. So I just want to set the tone of our conversation with those quite dreary stats. But before we get into a discussion, I'm going to hand over to you just to introduce you and the organisation.
Thank you. So as you said, the Terrence Higgins Trust is the largest HIV organisation in the UK. We work across HIV and sexual health and try and focus on those inequalities that blight people's lives. We were the first HIV charity. We were founded because a man called Terry Higgins died and was the first named person to die of an AIDS-related illness. And from that small acorn, a great oak tree has grown. We now are involved in preventing new cases of HIV and working to end HIV transmissions by 2030. We want to be here till the last person living with HIV needs us. The epidemic might end in a small number of years, but people will live with HIV for longer than the virus is transmitted, and we want to support people through that journey of their lives. And crucially, we want to make sure we are the voice of service users in the sexual health system. Too often the system gets cut and ebbed away because people don't say, I didn't get my chlamydia treatment, or I haven't recently had a test because I can't get an appointment, or they've run out for the day. So we've got to really add that to the system. I think it's a really important role for us to play. What that means is we are highly culturally competent with LGBT communities. So people living with HIV are proportionately more likely to be particularly gay, bisexual, or men who have sex with men than the wider population. Trans communities are many times more likely to experience HIV. And poor sexual health can often blight LGBT communities. And we're here to make sure that people can take control of their sexual health and live through their lives in the best way possible. But it also means we need to be there for when times are on the downs. And often we'll work with people who have mental health related challenges around either their HIV diagnosis or coming to terms with living with HIV, or about being at risk of HIV and that wider mental health culture that exists amongst gay men. I think also related to this, I don't think we can deny the kind of trauma and inherited trauma there is amongst queer people from the AIDS crisis. A virus hit quickly. It spread amongst people in the LGBT community, and at a time in which we're our most vulnerable and requiring care, support, love and affection, society met us with the cold reality of a judgmental NHS and pushed us out of mainstream society. And it was really, really tough for people. A whole generation of gay men are not with us, and many live in the wake of that. So I work with people who their friends and colleagues died at the time and aren't with us. I'm from a generation just after that where I know a number of people that passed away that live in that wake of it. So my coming out experience was mainly framed by people being nice about it, being awful about it, or tilting their head and saying, don't die of the sex you're about to enjoy. And then you've got the generation after that are being re-stigmatized on all the apps. First, second messages, are you clean? And re-stigmatizing that relationship. So I think the relationship in queer communities between sex and their mental health is often really interlinked.
Just going to delve into that one then. So gone off topic or gone off script already. I did say we were going to go off our little script. You talk about that generational difference there, which is really quite stark. So I'm of the same generation of you, living just after, knowing people, but actually, what about the generations that are kind of just coming to their sexual maturity now, and that Gen Z population, is it a different set of anxieties and pressures, or is it just a cascade through the ages?
I think it is a combination of things. In truth, there is clearly and has been a kind of group that broadly are approaching the world in quite heteronormative ways, that think that somehow AIDS was our own fault in some way. And I think one of the things that It's a Sin did, the TV program by Russell T Davies, was it showed how it was done to the community, how people had such little knowledge about this mystery virus at the beginning, how such little help was provided until it started to get too late and at risk, quite frankly, impacting heterosexuals. And I think I've seen that it's quite akin to the trans experience, where you've got this sense of it being politicized and highly radicalized, when what we're asking for is access to healthcare and people to be in charge of their physical, mental and sexual well-being.
And that link between mental health and sexual health, HIV, you as a charity work with people, like you say, across the full spectrum of support, and you run counselling services for people. What sort of things are you seeing? What are you hearing? What are people saying?
Well, I'm not in the counselling sessions myself, but it comes across quite strongly. So I think some of that inherited trauma is something, particularly those generations who've lived with HIV for a long time, are starting to be able to unpack and deal with. We see people coming forward who have got how their mental health interacts with sex, so sex being linked to their well-being, and then how that takes some people down a journey of what we call chemsex, and people kind of H&H, high and horny sessions, etc., and how that interplays with sex. So that's coming through quite strongly, and we have group work and individual counselling for people who've experienced chemsex and are wishing to get control of their lives and potentially exit those behaviours. So that's a big part of it going forward. But also I think there's a kind of hangover from expectations about what relationships may or may not be like, and that clearly having an interplay with their mental health. And others feel the external pressure of a group of people who are trying to radicalise trans people and their lives, and making out that the fight for their justice is somehow a kind of affront to wider society, and people leading that through the system.
And that the fight against the trans population, which is just one of the, it's one of those, it makes me very mad, let's be really honest, because you look at those statistics that almost half of trans people have tried to take their own lives, and then you look at everything in the media and what's been whipped up, and the rhetoric and everything that comes from politicians and from everywhere around. The pressure is huge on those people whilst going through a really challenging time in their lives, who've got a high propensity towards sexual health when it comes to things like HIV and sexual health. There's a lot stacked against the trans community at the moment, isn't there?
I think there are. However, I remain an optimist. We
Good.
have had some changes to the gender recognition rules to make it slightly easier and cheaper for people to do. There's lots more to do, but I think there has been some step forward. Obviously, Scotland saw the shape of what a bill might look like. It regrettably didn't make it into law, but we have seen now in a UK context what equality might look like. And I think that in itself, it moving from the theoretical to the practical is a really important journey forward. But also you're seeing people, I think, rally around the trans community in a really positive way. And we've had trans women on the front of Vogue and in cultural places in a way that's really positive. So I'm not downplaying the lived experience of trans people. We have staff who communicate that when the environment feels very hostile, that leaving their home and their proximity to where they might use a toilet is all things they have to take into consideration, as well as their personal well-being and literal safety, because not only do trans people regrettably think about their own, taking their own life, they know they're at risk of other people intervening in a way that means that they might be beaten up or worse, and that is tragic. So these are all things that people are having to contemplate with. But I suppose what I think is change is coming, and I think equality will win the day. When is the bit that is the big question. And for us, it will never be soon enough. So making the road to progress, I think, is a vital one. And if we keep focused on what we're here to do and why we're here to do it, I think we can make that progress.
That's a good segue then into the next question I've got, which is around the fact we're having this conversation for Pride Month, which is celebrated across June every year. And that march towards equality, and equality coming not fast enough, but definitely coming closer. Why is Pride so important? Why is it important to you? Why is it important to our community, would you say?
I think Pride is absolutely vital at showing we're here, we're queer, we're fabulous, we're diverse, and that we've got nothing to be ashamed of. I think that's what it does at its absolute core, and I think that really matters. It's I always call it Gay Christmas. It's that opportunity to get with friends and family.
I thought that was Eurovision Gay Christmas. Is this not Gay Boxing Day?
Oh, I think the gays have a few Christmases.
Okay, fine.
And I think it's important to have that outright celebration and expression, and an opportunity to reflect on how far we've come, and to be demanding yet again of the society we want to see going forward. And I think it does all three of those things really, really well. So for me, I kind of, every time I go, I remember going for the first time. And for those who've seen the film Pride, that immortalises lesbian, gays, support the minors, there's the character Bromley that kind of is meek and mild, goes along and just like hopes to be in the crowd, and gets dragged in to hold a banner and starts marching, gets brought into this organisation that ultimately changes history. And I think we're all that gay kid at some point that's a bit unsure of their place, wants to go, wants to be part of it, and is actually looking for somebody to drag us in off the street, and they hold this banner, grab this bucket or whatever we're doing to make that happen. And that was definitely me at one point. I've been on pretty much every march since I first went as a 19-year-old, and at least go to one big Pride event a year. And I think it's just a really important, as a kind of humbling reminder, that everyone's at a different part of that journey. You'll often get queer people who had a terrible coming out that want other people's to be equally as terrible, or want it to be completely different. And some people are so assured in their queer love and their queer life that they forget that other people are struggling on the margins of being in and out the closet, of being in and out the relationship status they might be in, of just coming to terms with it themselves and loving themselves before they can love somebody else. And I think Pride is that opportunity every year where we cast the net wide and say, you're all welcome. Come and be gay this week.
Just be gay with us.
Yeah, exactly. Come and enjoy it.
Back to all things mental health. If you don't mind me asking, because I ask this whenever I'm having a conversation with people about your mental health and what you do to maintain positive mental health, or not, which is the case maybe sometimes. But what are your things that you do to balance yourself?
I talk a lot, basically. Generally, if I'm having a bad day, I'll tell people I'm having a bad day, and can verbalise, I think, some of those things. I feel very lucky about that. I was taught from an early age that to share a problem is a problem halved, and all that stuff. It doesn't work for everybody, and I'm not suggesting, but I feel very lucky to have that, and are able to kind of verbalise those things. I think quite early on in that experience. I've had very stressful moments in my past, and I think I'm able to identify stress in myself early now and kind of walk back from those moments, so that helps going forward. And I'm very lucky that I'm an optimist, and I think that means that my mental health starts from a topped up position. And not everyone in my life has that, and not all the people I care about, and certainly not all those in the opportunity start from that place. But I feel very lucky and very privileged that the component parts of my mental health are ones that lead to positivity and optimism, and so I think that has given me a level of resilience. But I work with and know and love people who have a very different relationship with their mental health.
That talking piece, I think, is one of the most important things, isn't it? I think too often people don't verbalise how they're feeling for fear of anything, really, isn't it? For how people will judge them and how people perceive them. But actually talking, that first conversation is often the hardest, though, isn't it? and having that breaking the barrier of that conversation. And so with regards to your organisation and the Terrence Higgins Trust, how do people access help? So if someone's newly diagnosed with HIV or is indeed living with HIV and need help, how would they go about getting it?
So we have a myriad of ways in and lots of different types of support for people. So we work with a number of HIV organisations to put on newly diagnosed courses throughout the year, every year, so that we have a wide funnel for those who are newly diagnosed to come in to work with us. So they don't have to know the name of our organisations, but they can come in through different means and start accessing that support. They then can go on a journey in all different ways and forms. And somebody might go to these individual points for our website or other means that we promote. But we do individual one-to-one counselling. We do group work with people. We do peer support-led groups. And then we have projects that people are involved in that might be about returning to work, or it might be about skills or stuff in that direction. So there's a different series of ways that people can be involved if it's linked to their mental health. We then, in addition, have a program around those who are experiencing or have experienced chemsex and either wish to get control of their sexual habits and their drug use, or wish to be free from it completely. So we have a variety of ways. Our website is hopefully really good at helping people access those services, and we've just done a new, very user focused counselling service web product that will help people on that journey, I think, in a much more streamlined way. And we had users directly involved in planning that product.
Fantastic. Now, I always like to end conversations with hope, because it's too easy to focus on the things that are not full of hope. So what's your message of hope to the LGBTQ plus community, either around mental health or sexual health or HIV? What's your pearl of wisdom for hope?
I actually think there's lots of signs of hope. We've got a great LGBT sector of organisations that are working together like never before to bring about, whether it's better rights, better services, or better support across the society. So I think that's in a really good place. What I get out of bed for every day, and I'm very lucky to work on, is that it is now scientifically possible to end new cases of HIV by 2030. We could not only do that, we could be the first country in the world to do it. And we could end the onward transmission of this virus without a vaccine and without a cure. And doesn't mean we don't want a vaccine and a cure, and they can be very important for the global struggle. But we have all the tools here and now. And because we have the wonderful NHS that underpins it all, we could make that happen. And like I said, we could be the first country that does it. And I think the opportunity to play the part, to be the generation that ends the transmission and the kind of active part of the epidemic, is one we can't miss. And if that isn't something that can give people hope, that you can go and have future sexual relationships without HIV living rent-free in your mind, something you might fear, or acquiring HIV and the daily taking of tablets, I don't know what is, quite frankly. And so I think hope is strong, and I think change is coming.
That is a very hopeful message. I think that's what a thing to be the first of, if we can be the first country in the world. And like I say, it's scientifically possible, and the will is there. It's just getting through the numbers of people, isn't it? And that's the key now. So,
absolutely.
Richard, this has been a fantastic discussion, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much for the time. And for anybody who's looking for any help or any assistance in this world, get over to the Terrence Higgins Trust website, because it is a fab resource with lots of things. Richard, thank you very much.
Happy Pride Month.
Thank you.